This wasn't just love. It was a summoning from the universe. They say you fell in love. But what if I told you, you didn't fall? You were pulled. Pulled by a force deeper than logic, stronger than desire, older than your own memories. This wasn't just chemistry. This wasn't just romance. This was a cosmic collision. Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But here's the part no one talks about. Not all reactions feel like magic. Some feel like destruction. Some feel like being cracked open by a mirror you never asked to face. Because sometimes what we call love is actually a spiritual assignment. You didn't meet a person. You met a portal to your past wounds, to your suppressed desires, to the pieces of you that were buried so deep, only love could dig them up. This wasn't just a relationship. This was shadow work in disguise. The unconscious orchestrated what your ego could never plan. The soul saw a missing piece in someone else's energy and moved mountains to reach it, not to complete you, but to break you, rebuild you, and awaken the parts of you that were never truly alive. Because love, true love, doesn't just comfort, it confronts, it triggers the unhealed, it tests the version of you that isn't ready, so you can become the version of you that is. This wasn't love. This was a summoning. You thought you found the one? Maybe you found the mirror, and what stared back at you wasn't them. It was you, your shadow, your longing, your forgotten self. So if you've ever met someone who stirred your soul so deeply it hurt, who activated emotions you didn't even know you were capable of feeling, it wasn't random. It was Jungian synchronicity. It was divine disruption. It was the beginning of individuation, the path of becoming whole. Let me say this louder for the ones silently healing. You didn't just fall in love. You were chosen for transformation. So now let's go deeper. Here are 10 signs, according to Carl Jung's philosophy, that what you experienced wasn't ordinary love. It was a psychological initiation, a call to evolve, a sacred mirror revealing your true self beneath the masks. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you won't just understand love differently, you'll understand yourself. Chapter 1. They arrive when your shadow is ready. You don't meet them because you're lonely. You don't meet them because you're ready. You meet them because your shadow is. Not the version of you that smiles for photos. Not the version that plays it safe, stays busy and avoids mirrors. No, you meet them the moment your soul whispers, "It's time. Time to remember. Time to uncover. Time to feel again." Carl Jung taught that the shadow is everything within us that we've denied, repressed or disowned. Not because it's evil, but because we were taught it was unlovable. And here's where it gets deep. When someone enters your life and you feel an overwhelming, almost cosmic pull, it's not just chemistry. It's the reunion of forgotten parts of you, seeking integration. That person didn't walk into your life by accident. They were summoned, not by your conscious mind, but by your wounds, by your inner child, by every buried belief you've never dared to touch. And that's why every glance they give you feels like an X-ray. Every conversation peels back another layer. Every silence between you holds ancient echoes of things you've never said, but always felt. This isn't just attraction, this is soul activation. They don't just make you feel butterflies, they make you feel your broken pieces. They awaken emotions you thought you healed. They trigger insecurities you thought you buried. They expose fears that only surface when something real enters the room, and that's the secret. The deeper the connection, the louder your shadow speaks. You'll flinch, you'll overthink, you'll sabotage. Not because they're wrong for you, but because your shadow's never been this close to the light before. This isn't a romantic movie. This is transformation. The person you've met is not your missing half. They are the mirror you weren't ready to look into, until now. Real love doesn't just comfort, it confronts. It doesn't just hug your strengths, it holds up your weaknesses and says, "Are you ready to love these too?" So if you're wondering why it hurts, why it's overwhelming, why you can't explain why they feel like home and a storm at the same time, it's because your soul is cracking open. Because now, finally, your shadow is ready to be seen. Chapter 2. The connection feels strangely familiar. You meet them, and something inside you pauses, not in fear, but in a strange, aching recognition, like a part of you that had been sleeping, just opened its eyes. They don't feel new. They feel like a memory you forgot you had, like a dream you've woken from too many times, only to find yourself missing someone who doesn't exist. Until now. Carl Jung called this synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that your conscious mind can't explain, but your unconscious recognizes instantly, because sometimes it's not that you're meeting them for the first time. It's that your soul finally caught up to something it's always known. The way they speak, the way they look at you like they've seen you before. Not your face, but your truth. You feel seen, not just for who you are, but for who you were, and who you were always meant to become. This is what Jung meant by archetypes, unconscious patterns that echo across lifetimes, drawing us toward those who carry a message, a lesson, or a mirror. They walk into your life, and it's not sparks and chaos amid stillness, recognition, inner silence, because something ancient in you sighs with relief. Oh, it's you. And in that moment, logic steps aside. Ego loses control, time bends, and what's left is presence, energy, a force that feels both wildly magnetic and deeply peaceful. You try to explain it to your friends, but you sound crazy. Because how do you explain a connection that didn't begin here? How do you define something that feels like a memory from before you were born? That's the mystery of it. This connection doesn't feel familiar because it's comfortable. It feels familiar because it's connected to your unconscious blueprint, to the patterns, wounds, and dreams that have shaped you long before this moment. You weren't just drawn to them, you were remembering them, not them as a person, but them as a reflection of something hidden in you, something sacred, something that only now feels safe enough to come out. And when that kind of connection happens, you don't just feel love, you feel awakening, because this wasn't the first time your souls touched. This was just the first time you were awake enough to notice. Chapter 3. Intense emotional triggers. They say love should feel like peace, but what if real love feels like war, not with the other person, but with yourself? You meet them, your heart opens, and suddenly, so does your pain, not because they're hurting you, but because they're holding up a mirror to the parts of you that are still hurting. Carl Jung said it best. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. But a soulmate? They don't let you run, they don't let you numb, they don't let you pretend you're fine when deep down you're crumbling. And it's not because they're cruel, it's because their very presence activates your unfinished business. One compliment from them, and you feel unworthy. One moment of silence, and your abandonment wounds scream. One misunderstanding, and suddenly, you're reliving your childhood all over again. Why? Because this isn't surface-level love. This is deep soul surgery. They touch wounds you forgot existed, not to reopen them, but to bring them into the light. The deeper they trigger you, the deeper you're being called to heal. And that's the paradox. You might think, why does love like this hurt so much? But the truth is, it's not love that's hurting. It's the pain you've been carrying for years, now finally being exposed. They are not the source of your pain. They are the catalyst, the unlock, the mirror that shows you where you still don't love yourself. This is what Jung called shadow work, the sacred, messy process of facing the parts of ourselves that we've rejected, repressed, or disowned. And real love isn't afraid of your shadow. It walks straight into it and asks, will you still choose yourself, even when you feel broken? So yes, love can trigger you, shake you, break you wide open, but it does it for one reason: to show you the door you've been too scared to open. And when you walk through it, now you don't just fall in love with them, you reclaim the lost pieces of yourself. Because the person who triggers you the most might just be the one your soul chose to set you free. Chapter 4. Synchronicity surrounds your meeting. It wasn't supposed to happen that day. You weren't supposed to go there. You almost cancelled. They almost didn't show. But somehow, your eyes met, your paths crossed, your souls remembered. And in that one moment, everything shifted. You call it coincidence, chance, fate, maybe. But Carl Jung had a different name for it, synchronicity. Jung taught that synchronicity is when two seemingly unrelated events collide in time, but carry a deeper meaning that defies logic, not random, meaningful, timed, soul-aligned. You didn't just meet them, you were meant to meet them, and the universe made sure of it. That accidental DM, that missed flight that led to a conversation, that one mutual friend who connected you without knowing why. None of it was luck. It was a divine breadcrumb trail, and your soul followed it perfectly, because before your bodies met, your energies were already dancing. Before the hello, your unconscious minds had already signed the contract. And when the timing aligned in this physical realm, it wasn't your doing, it was a summoning. Jung believed the unconscious is always guiding us, always moving in the background, nudging, aligning, orchestrating people and events with surgical precision, not to make life easier, but to awaken you. And when it's time for you to evolve, your unconscious will call in the person who carries the exact frequency to do it, the one whose presence stirs your truth, the one whose story activates your next chapter, the one whose arrival you feel more than understand. You'll look back and realize it didn't make sense logically, but it made everything make sense emotionally, spiritually, cosmically. That's the thing about real connections. They don't happen on your schedule. They don't follow your checklist. They happen when your soul is aligned, even if your mind is still confused. And that's how you know it's real, because it bypasses your logic and speaks straight to your destiny. So next time you say, "We met by accident," pause. Look deeper, because that accident may have been the very moment your shadow met its mirror and your future cracked open. Chapter 5. They challenge your false self. We all wear masks, not because we're fake, but because somewhere along the way we were taught it was safer to perform than to be seen. We built identities not out of authenticity, but out of survival. You became the strong one, or the smart one, or the nice one. You created a version of yourself the world could accept, praise, validate, even if it cost you the truth of who you really are. Carl Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear to navigate society. But beneath the persona is the self, raw, real, divine. And then they walked in. And somehow this person didn't buy the act. They didn't care how successful you looked, how well you played the part. They weren't hypnotized by your charm, your confidence, your image. They saw past it. They didn't fall in love with your mask. They collided with your essence, and that's why it feels so intense. Because being seen without your mask doesn't feel romantic. It feels terrifying. It feels like standing naked in front of someone holding a mirror. It feels like your ego is dying, and because in a way it is, they make you question your habits, your beliefs, the lies you've been telling yourself for years just to cope. And it's not because they're trying to fix you. It's because their energy, their truth, doesn't align with your illusion. They interrupt the story you've been telling. They disrupt the role you've been playing. They challenge the false identity you built to feel loved. And that's how you know it's real. True love doesn't flatter your facade. It breaks the illusion. It strips away everything that's not you. It confronts the mask and whispers, "You don't need this anymore." It makes you sit in the discomfort of your own truth, so you can finally meet the version of you that was buried beneath performance. And yes, it's vulnerable, yes, it's exposing, yes, it's terrifying, but it's also sacred. Because being loved for your mask is validation, but being seen without it, and still chosen, is healing. They don't love the character you've been playing. They love the soul behind the costume. And when someone meets that version of you, not only do you feel exposed, you finally feel real. Because love that awakens you will always feel more like remembering than romance. It doesn't make you more impressive, it makes you more honest. And that's when the healing begins. Not when someone praises your mask, but when someone dares to reach for your soul and stays. Chapter 6. You see your shadow through them. At first you think it's them, they're distant, cold, too emotional, too intense, too unavailable, too something, but then something deeper stirs. a whisper in your mind, a question from your soul. Is this really who they are? Or Pupu, is this who I am reflected back at me? Carl Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And nowhere is that more true than in love, because soulmates don't just reflect your dreams, they reflect your demons. They hold up a mirror not just to your light, but to your shadow, to your jealousy, your need for control, your abandonment issues, your unworthiness, your emotional armor. Everything you've disowned, suddenly standing right in front of you wearing someone else's face. You think they're the problem. They're emotionally unavailable. They don't reassure you. They push you away. They make you feel insecure. But here's the brutal truth. They're activating a wound that was already there. Long before they arrived, long before they said or didn't say anything. They're not doing it to hurt you. They're doing it because their energy matches the frequency of your buried pain. This is the work Jung called projection. When we see in others what we haven't yet owned in ourselves, and the deeper the connection, the more intense the projection. You'll feel judged, because you judge yourself. You'll feel abandoned, because a part of you still abandons your own emotional needs. You'll feel unloved, because you never fully learned to love yourself without conditions. And that's the awakening. Because once you stop blaming them, you start meeting you. You stop saying, why are they like this? And start asking, what part of me is trying to get my attention? This is the sacred pain of a soulmate connection. They don't just come to give you butterflies. They come to show you where you're still bleeding. You won't see it at first. You'll argue, pull away, blame. But over time, if you're willing to do the work, you'll realize this was never about fixing them. It was about reclaiming the parts of you you've tried to live without. The anger, the neediness, the fear of not being enough, the child inside you still crying to be seen. They showed you all of it. And in doing so, they handed you the gift most people run from, the invitation to become whole. Because until you face your own shadow, you'll keep attracting it, you'll keep dating it, you'll keep blaming it over and over again, just with different names. True love doesn't just bring peace, it brings confrontation. And if they triggered the deepest parts of your being, maybe it wasn't punishment, maybe it was the beginning of your liberation. Chapter 7. They disrupt your life's flow. They didn't just enter your life, they shook it, like a storm you didn't expect, like a lightning bolt in the middle of a calm sky. One moment, everything felt predictable, safe, familiar. And then, they arrived. And suddenly, nothing made sense anymore. Old friendships started to feel distant. Your usual habits began to feel meaningless. The things you once chased no longer excited you. And your inner world, it turned into a battlefield. But hear this clearly. This wasn't chaos. It was an initiation. Carl Jung taught that every true spiritual awakening begins with disruption. Because before you can be reborn, your false life has to collapse. You thought they were here to be your partner, to hold hands, to play roles, to give comfort. But they weren't sent to protect your routine. They were sent to dismantle your illusion. They came to activate a truth buried so deep inside you, your old life couldn't hold it. This is what Jung meant by individuation, the sacred process where the ego breaks down so that the true self can emerge. When they walked in, they didn't just touch your heart, they exposed your foundation, and suddenly everything that wasn't built on truth began to crack. Friends who no longer understood you fell away. Goals you once thought were everything now feel empty. Comfort zones turned into cages. Silence got louder. Emotions got messier. And you began to feel things you couldn't explain. It felt like chaos. But in truth, it was cosmic construction. Because sometimes the universe doesn't send peace first. It sends disruption, to break the version of you that's been pretending. And that's how you know this connection was real. It didn't just fit into your life, it forced you to rebuild your life. This isn't destruction, this is divine demolition. The tearing down of everything that was no longer aligned, so that the next version of you could rise. Jung once said, "In all chaos there is a cosmos, in all disorder a secret order." That secret order is your soul blueprint, and their arrival was the spark that ignited it. So no, they didn't ruin your life. They redefined it. And the confusion you're feeling right now, it's not the end of your path, it's the beginning of your real one. Because transformation never starts with clarity, it starts with disruption. And if your world is shaking, Chapter 8. They don't complete you. They reveal your wholeness. Let go of the fantasy. This isn't Hollywood. This isn't some broken heart meets savior storyline. This is sacred reality. They didn't come to complete you, because you were never incomplete. They didn't arrive to fill a void. They arrived to remind you there was never one. See, the world taught you to seek outside of yourself, to search for someone who would fix you, to crave a partner who would be your better half, to believe that you were only half a soul waiting to be rescued. But that's a lie. A beautiful, dangerous lie. Carl Jung shattered that illusion when he said, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration." And integration only happens when you stop looking outward for completion and start looking inward for truth. The person who enters your life at this level of depth, they don't complete you. They awaken you. They reflect the you that you forgot existed, the confident version of you that got buried under fear, the passionate self that dimmed itself to please others, the fearless soul that used to dream big before the world said, "Be realistic." They don't rescue you, they remind you. And that's why it feels so different, so intense, so spiritual. Because they don't just love who you are now, they see the pieces of you that have been disowned, discarded, or denied. And they hold space for you to bring those parts home. This is the work of the true soulmate, not to become your missing half, but to help you realize you've always been whole. You just forgot. Forgot because of trauma, because of rejection, because of childhood conditioning, because of years trying to be enough for everyone but yourself. They come in like a mirror, not a fantasy, not a fairy tale, a mirror of your full self. And that mirror doesn't just show your beauty. It shows your strength, your buried power, your forgotten depth, your divine wholeness. And that's why it can feel so raw, so unsettling. Because when someone stops trying to save you and instead sees you as already whole, you're forced to confront the truth that maybe you never needed saving at all. Maybe you just needed remembering, and that's what they do. They remember you back to yourself, not through fixing, but through reflection, not through healing you, but by creating the space where you can finally heal yourself. And that's real love, not dependency, not fantasy, but soul-level integration. Because the one who truly loves you will never tell you that you're incomplete. They'll remind you with their presence that you were always everything. Chapter 9. The relationship feels divine, yet impossible. There's a feeling you can't explain. From the moment you met them, it didn't feel like chance. It felt cosmic, fated, like something written long before you were born. You didn't choose them. You recognized them. In their voice, in their eyes, in the way your soul seemed to breathe for the first time in years. But then, the pain began. The timing was off, the distance too wide, the emotions too intense. One of you wasn't ready. Life got in the way, and suddenly this divine connection began to feel like a divine contradiction. How can something that feels so right be so impossible? Carl Jung had an answer. He called it the tension of opposites, the sacred psychological friction between two poles, the conscious and the unconscious, the ego and the soul, the comfort of control, and the chaos of transformation. When you meet a person who touches your unconscious so deeply, who awakens the buried, the hidden, the shadow, you don't get simplicity. You get alchemy. And alchemy by nature is messy. It's fire, pressure, destruction, because something inside you has to die in order for something sacred to be born. This is why it feels both divine and devastating. You crave them, but being around them feels overwhelming. You long for union, but your wounds sabotage the closeness. You try to walk away, but the connection pulls you back like gravity. This is not confusion, this is transformation. And it's not here to be convenient, it's here to wake you up. You're not just in a relationship. You're standing at the edge of your inner universe, staring into a mirror that reflects both your highest potential and your deepest fears. And no, it's not supposed to be easy. Easy doesn't change you. This was never about comfort. It's about expansion. You want to hold on. You want to run. You want to fight for it. You want to forget it. That's the paradox of soul-aligned connection. It doesn't give you clarity at first, it gives you contradiction. It pulls you into the sacred space where pain becomes purpose and confusion becomes consciousness. Because that tension, that feeling of being torn between desire and despair, it's not dysfunction. It's a divine design, a force sculpting your soul into its next evolution. Jung taught that this tension of opposites must be held, not resolved. That your longing, your ache, your frustration are the exact ingredients required for growth. You are being stretched, broken open, made to hold more than your ego can bear. Because through this relationship, you are becoming more than who you were. So if it feels impossible, maybe it's not the end. Maybe it's the sacred pressure that cracks open your false self and invites your soul to finally step forward. This wasn't meant to be easy. It was meant to be transformative, and transformation always asks for something in return. Your comfort, your expectations, your old identity. But what you get back is your truth. Chapter 10. The love leads you back to yourself. Some stories don't end the way we imagined, some hearts don't stay, some hands you once held become memories, and some souls, no matter how divine the connection, don't walk with you forever. And that's okay, because this was never just about them, this was about you, whether they stay in your life or vanish like smoke, whether the story ends in lifelong commitment or silent heartbreak, the truth remains, you are not the same. They didn't just touch your heart, they cracked it open. They didn't just make you feel love, they made you confront everything inside you that was unloved. And in doing so, they didn't just change your path, they changed you. Carl Jung called this sacred journey individuation, the path back to the self. Not the self you show the world, not the self shaped by survival, by people-pleasing, by roles and responsibilities, but the real self, the one buried beneath trauma, the one waiting beneath the mask, the one your shadow has been guarding all along. And this love, as divine, painful, beautiful, and complicated as it was the key. Because through them, you saw yourself, your fears, your light, your darkness, your potential, your pain, your power. You saw what needed to be healed. You felt emotions you never gave yourself permission to feel. You cried in ways you didn't know you could. You awakened desires, dreams, wounds, truths that had been silent for far too long. They didn't save you, but they awakened the version of you who could. They didn't complete you, but they revealed the wholeness you forgot. And maybe that was the point all along. That was the point. This love wasn't a destination. It was a mirror, a reflection of everything you're becoming, a reminder of everything you already are. You thought you met your soulmate, but what you really met was the part of you your soul had been dying to meet, the part you abandoned, the part you judged, the part you thought wasn't worthy of love. And through loving them, you began to reclaim yourself. So no, this wasn't just love. This was a spiritual initiation. It brought your unconscious to the surface. It made your shadow visible. It shattered the illusions. It burned down the masks. And from the ashes, you rose, different, deeper, wiser, more whole. So even if they're gone, even if the story ended, don't you dare call it a failure. Because look at you now, look at what you've become. You are no longer waiting to be loved. You are learning how to love yourself. You are no longer running from your pain. You are facing it, integrating it, becoming one with it. Because the greatest gift this love ever gave you wasn't the relationship. It was the return to your true self. And in the end, that's what real love does. It leads you home, not to another person, but to the person you were always meant to be. This wasn't just a video, this was a soul awakening. Let's not pretend. You didn't just watch this, you felt it in your gut, in your chest, in the deepest corners of your past that you thought were buried. This wasn't content. This was a confrontation with the love you lost, with the version of you that forgot who they were, with the truth you've been scared to face. So now what? You scroll to the next video and numb it? Or you claim the version of you that just woke up?